She was nobody, a waitress balancing champagne flutes at a contract signing she was never supposed to witness. But when she locked eyes with Oh Kyung-min, the most dangerous man in Seoul's underworld, something ancient and electric cracked open between them like a fault line splitting stone. He had come to sign a billion-dollar deal, surrounded by lawyers and lies, but it was her, curvy, dark-skinned, breathtaking in a white server's apron, who leaned close enough to make his blood run cold and whispered 4 words that stopped the entire room. "Your secretary is lying." Now the contract sat and signed. The room was a powder keg, and Oh Kyung-min was staring at a woman he had never met before, wondering why, for the first time in 15 years of ruling an empire built on blood and silence, he felt something dangerously close to trust. Welcome to Afrokorea TV. Please like, share, and subscribe. The Jizeon Tower's 42nd floor smelled like expensive cologne, fresh orchids, and the particular kind of danger that only existed where enormous amounts of money changed hands. Crystal chandeliers threw prismatic light across a long obsidian table, and 20 men in tailored suits sat arranged on both sides like chess pieces, each one representing something powerful, each one calculating, each one pretending the room wasn't suffocating. Destiny Adeyemi moved through them like water, invisible the way service staff always are to people who consider themselves important. She was 26, Nigerian-born, Seoul residing for 3 years now, and she had long mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight. Her catering uniform, white blouse, black slacks, did nothing to hide the warm brown curves of her figure or the proud, elegant line of her jaw, but no one in this room was looking at the waitress. They were all looking at him. Oh Kyung-min sat at the head of the table. Destiny noticed him the moment she'd entered, and she'd spent the first 10 minutes trying very hard not to look at him again. He was tall, even-seated, broad through the shoulders, lean through the jaw, with the kind of face that seemed carved rather than born. Cold black eyes beneath straight brows. A mouth that looked like it had never smiled without calculation behind it. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie, the top button of his white shirt open, and somehow that small informality made him look more dangerous than any of the overdressed men flanking him. He was Oh Kyung-min. Even the catering company manager had whispered it like a warning when they'd briefed the staff that morning. Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't spill anything. And for the love of every ancestor you have, do not get in his way. Destiny had nodded and promptly forgotten every instruction the moment she'd walked in and felt the weight of this room pressed down on her chest. She circulated with the champagne tray. Quiet. Efficient. Unremarkable. And then she heard it. She had just rounded the far end of the table to refill the glass of a man she'd later learn was Oh Kyung-min's personal secretary, a sharp-faced Korean man named Cha Jung-won, mid-30s, with a smile that never reached his eyes. When her acute hearing caught the tail end of a phone conversation the man was conducting in hushed, rapid Korean, his body angled away from the room, his phone half hidden beneath the table. Destiny spoke 4 languages. Korean was her third. The clause is buried in Article 9. He won't see it until it's too late. By the time he reviews the transfer codes, the offshore account will already be empty. Just make sure the Voss signature is on the secondary documentation before midnight. The secretary ended the call, adjusted his jacket, smiled pleasantly at the man beside him. Destiny's heart stopped. She kept moving, kept filling glasses. Her hands were perfectly steady because she had learned, through years of navigating difficult spaces, how to make her body lie when her mind was screaming. Article 9. Offshore account. Midnight. She looked at Oh Kyung-min. He was reviewing the contract document in front of him with the focused intensity of a man who read everything. Except, and this was the part that made her stomach drop, the document he was reviewing was the summary brief. The full contract, the one with Article 9, sat in a sealed folder at the center of the table. It hadn't been opened yet. It was going to be signed first, reviewed by legal teams after. That was the trap. Destiny circulated back to the service station. She set down her tray. She picked it back up. She set it down again. This is not your business, she told herself. This man runs the largest criminal syndicate in East Asia. If his secretary is stealing from him, that is between them and God, and probably several unmarked graves. You pour the champagne. You go home. You mind your life. Her grandmother's voice cut through the internal debate like a machete. A woman who sees wrongdoing and says nothing is an accomplice to it, Destiny. You were not raised to be small. She closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she picked up a champagne bottle and walked toward Oh Kyung-min. The approach alone caused 2 of his bodyguards, stationed at the periphery, invisible to most, to straighten and track her movement. She felt their attention like laser points on her skin. She did not slow down. She reached Oh Kyung-min's right side, leaned forward to refill his glass, which was already full. He did not look at her. She kept her voice below a breath. Below the room. Below everything. Your secretary is lying. The pen in Oh Kyung-min's hand stilled. Article 9. Check the transfer codes before you sign. She straightened, moved away, continued her circuit of the table as though nothing had happened, her face perfectly neutral, her pulse a catastrophe behind her ribs. At the head of the table, Oh Kyung-min set his pen down slowly. I'd like a short recess, he said. His voice was quiet. It silenced the room the way a gunshot would have. 20 minutes. The 20 minutes stretched into 40. Then 90. Destiny had retreated to the service corridor with the rest of the catering staff, and she was in the middle of a silent, internal spiral of terror when the door opened and one of Kyung-min's men, not a bodyguard, something higher, something quieter, stepped in and looked directly at her. Mr. would like to speak with you. The other catering staff stared. Destiny smoothed her blouse, lifted her chin, and followed. He was alone in a smaller room off the main hall, a private reception space with tall windows and city light pouring in silver blue from 40 stories above Seoul. The contract was on the table in front of him. Open now. Article 9 circled in red ink so dark it looked like a wound. He was standing when she entered. He turned. Up close, Oh Kyung-min was something else entirely. His eyes weren't just cold, they were complex, the kind of dark that had depth rather than absence, and right now they were fixed on her with the full weight of his attention in a way that made the air feel thinner. You speak Korean, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. She was proud of that. You heard my secretary's phone call. Part of it. And you chose to warn me. He studied her the way one might study something genuinely unexpected. Not dismissive, not predatory. Curious. Why? Destiny held his gaze. Because it was the right thing to do. Something shifted in his face. Microscopic. Almost nothing. But she saw it, a flicker behind those dark eyes, as though the concept of someone acting without agenda was so foreign to him it required processing. Your name, he said. Destiny. Destiny Adeyemi. Nigerian? Yes. You work for the catering company? Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, the transfer codes were corrupted. The offshore account would have drained my operating funds by morning. The contract would have bound me to a clause that gave my secondary partner full access to our Seoul accounts. He paused. Jong-won has been with me for 7 years. She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. You may have saved me from a significant loss tonight, Destiny Adeyemi. His accent shaped her name carefully, like he was learning the geography of it. What do you want in return? She blinked. Nothing. He looked at her like she'd spoken in a language he didn't recognize. Everyone wants something. I wanted to do the right thing, she said. That's all. I'm not asking for anything. I should go back to I'll double your salary. She stopped moving. I'm a waitress. Not anymore. He said it with the calm finality of someone who made decisions the way other people breathed. I need someone in my inner circle I can trust. Someone no one would suspect. Someone who is perceptive, calm, and apparently possessed of an inconvenient conscience. His eyes moved over her face, not invasively, but with the precision of someone reading fine print. You are all three. Mr. Oh Kyung-min, he corrected quietly. The sound of her own heartbeat was very loud in her ears. You don't know me. I know you watched a man betray me, had nothing to gain and everything to lose from speaking, and spoke anyway. His jaw was set with quiet certainty. That tells me more than a reference letter. The city glittered 40 floors below them. Somewhere in the building, she could hear the low murmur of the meeting resuming. The world continuing. Destiny looked at this man, this powerful, dangerous, unfathomable man, and knew, with the particular clarity that arrived at the worst possible moments, that agreeing to this would change her life irrevocably. What would I be doing exactly? She heard herself ask. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but something close. Come to the Han Group headquarters on Monday, he said. We'll discuss it then. She went on Monday. She told herself it was curiosity. She told her best friend Amara it was opportunity. She told her bathroom mirror at 6 in the morning, while pressing her natural hair into a professional twist, that it was temporary. She would hear the offer, decide it was insane, and politely decline. She accepted the position by 10:15. The Han Group occupied 3 floors of glass and steel in Gangnam, and it operated on 2 levels. The surface-level conglomerate, hospitality, real estate, private security, and the shadow empire beneath it that the public pretended didn't exist, and the government occasionally pretended to investigate. Kyungmin ran both with the same methodical precision, and he installed Destiny in an office adjacent to his own with the title Special Executive Liaison, which, she quickly learned, meant she was his second set of eyes. Her job: attend meetings, monitor documents, report inconsistencies. Use her outsider status, foreigner, woman, non-corporate, to observe what everyone assumed she couldn't understand. It was brilliant, honestly, and deeply unsettling. The staff received her with the careful neutrality of people who did not want to react incorrectly in front of their employer. Some were genuinely welcoming. A few were visibly hostile, though they buried it under professional courtesy. His chief of operations, a compact, sharp-eyed man named Director Yoon, assessed her with the expression of someone solving an equation, and for the first 3 weeks said nothing directly to her that wasn't strictly necessary. Kyungmin himself was complicated. In meetings, he was exactly what his reputation promised. Precise, commanding, and so absolutely in control that being in the room with him felt like being in the vicinity of a powerful current. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Men twice his age complied when he spoke because the alternative was unthinkable, and everyone in that building felt it. Alone, or what passed for alone, which was the quiet moments in his office between meetings when it was only the 2 of them reviewing documents. He was different. Not soft. Not yet. But there were edges that weren't as sharp. He asked about her background, not intrusively but with genuine attention, the way someone listens when they are actually curious rather than performing it. He remembered things. She mentioned once, offhandedly, that she preferred her coffee black with a single cube of sugar, and the next morning there was a cup exactly that way on her desk. She didn't see him order it. It was simply there. She told herself it was good management. Then he started sending the car. Not always. Just when she worked late, which, in the first month, was almost every day because the backlog of documents she was reviewing contained inconsistencies that multiplied the further she dug. The car would appear at the lobby door at whatever hour. She finally packed up, a sleek black vehicle with a driver who offered no explanations and needed none. You don't have to do that, she told Kyungmin one Thursday evening. He looked up from his desk. The subway is dangerous at this hour. People take the subway at this hour every night in Seoul. Other people, he said, are not my concern. He looked back at his documents in a way that made it clear the conversation was over, and Destiny stood in the doorway of his office for a moment too long, her chest doing something inconvenient, before she turned and left. A few weeks later, Director Yoon pulled her aside after a board meeting. Be careful, he said, low enough that no one else could hear. His expression wasn't hostile. It was something closer to warning. Mr. O doesn't do things casually. Whatever you think this is, be careful. She met his gaze steadily. I appreciate that. He nodded once and walked away, and Destiny stood in the corridor for a long moment, the echo of his words settling into her like a stone dropped into still water. Whatever you think this is. The problem was she wasn't sure what she thought it was. She knew what her body thought. That was obvious and annoying, and she was managing it. She knew what her professional self thought. This was a remarkable opportunity that required vigilance. What she didn't know was what to do with the moments between, the small, accumulating weight of him watching her across a room, or the way he had stepped between her and a contact's handshake at an event last week with no explanation except a barely perceptible narrowing of his eyes when the man had held her hand a half-second too long. She filed it under Power Dynamics and went back to work. It was a charity gala, one of the Haen Group's quarterly public appearances, and Destiny had been told she was attending as his liaison, which meant standing at appropriate distances and looking professional. What it actually meant, she discovered, was that Oh Kyung-min kept ending up within 2 feet of her regardless of which direction either of them moved, and twice during the evening she caught him looking at her from across the room with an expression she could not classify. She was speaking with a French business associate named Matthew Gerard, charming, mid-40s, the kind of man who was professionally handsome and knew it, when she became aware of a shift in the room's atmosphere. The slight drop in ambient sound. The way people angled their bodies. Kyung-min appeared at her side. He did not announce himself. He simply arrived, placed one hand at the small of her back, warm, firm, and electric in a way that short-circuited her ability to think for a full 2 seconds, and addressed Matthew with a smile that reached exactly as far as his teeth. Gerard, glad you could make it. His hand did not move from her back. Matthew's charming expression adjusted by a few polite degrees. Oh, Kyung-min, your associate, and I were just becoming acquainted. I know. Kyung-min's voice was pleasant and completely frigid. Destiny, the delegation from Busan is looking for you. I mentioned you'd handle the introduction. This was fabricated. There was no Busan delegation. She knew it. He knew she knew it. She smiled at Matthew, excused herself, and let Kyung-min guide her away with his hand still at her back until they reached a quieter alcove near the terrace doors. She turned to face him. There's no Busan delegation. No. So that was... He was not here to discuss business with you, Kyung-min said. His voice was even. His jaw was tight. His eyes were doing that dark, complex thing they did when he was managing something he didn't want visible on his face. Destiny tilted her head. He works in cross-industry partnerships. We were discussing. I know what Gerard discusses with women who interest him. The words came out clipped, controlled, with just enough heat underneath them to make her breath catch. It is not business. The terrace light caught the sharp line of his profile, and Destiny was suddenly very aware that they were standing close, much closer than the professional distance she maintained during the day, and that his hand was still hovering near her waist, not quite touching, as though he'd caught himself and couldn't decide whether to withdraw. Kyung-min, she said quietly. His eyes came to hers. What am I to you? She asked it the way she asked everything, directly, without softening. Actually, the silence between them had weight and temperature. The gala continued around them, glasses and laughter and music, but in this small space it was absolutely still. You work for me, he said. That's the official answer. His jaw moved. Destiny. I need to know. She held her ground. Because the car at midnight and the coffee and tonight, those aren't. She stopped. Recalibrated. I need to understand what this is. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something move through his expression like weather, complicated, layered, too fast to fully read. Then he stepped back, put the careful distance back between them. We should return to the event, he said. She had her answer. She told herself it didn't sting. 3 months into her position, the first threat arrived. It was tucked beneath her car's windshield wiper in the Haen Group parking structure, a small white envelope, her name written in block Korean letters. Inside, a single line. You are standing in a place that is not yours. Leave before you are removed. She brought it to Kyung-min's office without deliberating. Set it on his desk. Watched his face as he read it. The temperature of the room changed. When did you find this? His voice was controlled, but underneath, it was something molten. An hour ago. The parking structure. I checked the angles. There's a blind spot between camera 4 and camera 7. Someone new. He looked at her. The expression on his face was one she hadn't seen before. Not the calculated public mask, not the guarded private version. This was raw. Brief, but raw. You're not afraid. I'm very afraid, she said. I'm just not panicking. He was quiet for a count of 3. Then, I am increasing your security detail. Effective immediately. Kyungmin, I don't need 2 escorts. A driver with emergency clearance. New route algorithms every 48 hours. He stood, and the full force of him as he moved was something that always recalibrated the air in a room. This is not negotiable. Who is it from? His mouth was a flat line. There are candidates. He picked up his phone, dialed, and when Director Yoon answered, his instructions were delivered in rapid Korean with the quiet precision of someone compiling a war plan. He moved to the window as he spoke, silhouetted against the Seoul skyline, and Destiny watched his back, the rigid line of his shoulders, the controlled tension in his posture, and felt something crack open in her chest that had nothing to do with the threat and everything to do with the specific, terrifying realization that she did not want to leave. Grandmother, she thought, I am in so much trouble. The investigation into the threat ran parallel to Destiny's work, invisible to her day-to-day, but felt in the heightened alertness of the 2 men who appeared wherever she went and the new badge access protocols on her floor. What she did not expect was Seo Ha-jun. He was a senior attorney attached to the Haein Group's legal division, early 30s, classically handsome, the kind of effortlessly easy person who made rooms comfortable by existing in them. He began appearing in the executive corridor around the 4th month, working the contract renegotiations after Cha Jung-won's departure, and he greeted Destiny the first time they met with a full wattage smile and said, in perfect English, "You must be the legendary Adiemi, the woman who caught Jung-won. I owe you a coffee." She laughed, actually laughed, genuinely and unself-consciously, and said, "I'll take it." By the 3rd week, they had a standing coffee hour at the Atrium Cafe. Ha-jun was funny and warm and openly interested in her in a way that was completely uncomplicated and therefore deeply refreshing. He asked about Lagos, about her family, about what she'd done before Seoul, and he listened to the answers with his full attention. She was in the middle of describing her grandmother's market stall when she happened to look up and found Kyungmin standing at the atrium entrance, motionless, watching them. He was perhaps 30 meters away. His face was closed and unreadable, but his eyes, those dark, impossible eyes, were fixed on the table where she sat with Ha-jun, and in the 3 seconds before he looked away and continued walking, she saw something in them that took her breath. Fury was too loud a word. Hunger was too simple. Whatever it was, it walked out of the atrium with him, and Destiny sat with her coffee growing cold and her heart doing something inadvisable in her chest. The next day, he called her into his office for a briefing that lasted 4 hours and covered 6 months of backlogged financial irregularities, and he sat across the desk from her the entire time without once referencing the atrium, the coffee, or Ha-jun. But at the end, as she gathered her tablet and stood to leave, he said, without looking up from his documents, Seo Ha-jun has a history of forming attachments with women in the company. She paused. Is that a warning? He still didn't look up. It is a fact. Right. She adjusted the tablet under her arm. Thank you for the fact, Kyungmin. She was at the door when he said, quieter. You deserve better than a man who does it out of habit. She left without responding, because there was nothing to say that wasn't either a confrontation or a confession, and she wasn't ready for either. It was a catalyst nobody planned. 5 months in, a rival faction, the Jungdo Network, a criminal enterprise with territorial ambitions and a grudge against the Haein Group stretching back a decade, made their move. Not through the financial infrastructure. Not through political pressure. Through her. She was working late, alone in her office, her security detail 2 floors down in the lobby during a rotation gap, when the elevator opened and 3 men stepped out who were not Haein Group employees. She recognized the gap immediately. The way they moved, the way their eyes mapped the space, the casual purpose that was not casual at all. She had approximately 4 seconds. She did not scream. She reached for her phone, typed a single code to the Haein Group's emergency security channel, the protocol Kyungmin had made her memorize during her first week, and got as far as hitting send before the first man reached her. What followed was confused and terrifying. She fought, more effectively than they expected, because her brother in Lagos had spent 3 years teaching her to fight, and she had never been more grateful for his stubbornness, and she bought herself time. Not enough time, but time. She was in the stairwell, 2 floors down, with a torn sleeve and a cut across her palm, when she heard the flood of footsteps above, rapid, disciplined, multiple, and then the sharp controlled sounds of Haein Group security doing what they were built to do. And then Kyungmin's voice, somewhere above her in the stairwell, her name in his mouth the way she had never heard it. Not professional, not neutral, not managed. Raw and jagged, and 3 syllables of pure terror. Destiny. Here, she called back, pressing her uninjured hand to the wall to steady herself. I'm here. I'm okay. He came around the landing above and stopped. She had seen Oh Kyungmin controlled and strategic and terrifyingly composed. She had never seen him like this. Jacket gone, tie discarded, chest heaving with exertion, eyes moving over her with an expression that stripped every wall between them and revealed something so unguarded it made her throat tighten. He was down the stairs in 3 steps, and his hands were on her face, cupping her jaw, tilting her face to the light to check her. And he was speaking in Korean too fast for her to follow all of it, but she caught her, "You hurt, and I'm going to burn this city down," and something that sounded like her name again, just her name, repeated like a prayer or a verdict. "I'm okay," she said again. Her voice shook slightly now that the adrenaline was bleeding out. His hands stilled on her face. He was close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, see the line of his jaw, the undone collar of his shirt, the absolute storm in his eyes now resolving into something that was worse than fury, something that was grief mixed with relief, and both of them looking directly at her. "You're bleeding," he said. His voice had gone very quiet. "It's my hand. I'm okay, Kyungmin. I promise." He exhaled, one long, controlled breath that shook at the end, and then his forehead came down and rested against hers. Just that. Just the lightest contact. Eyes closed. The city rumbling 40 stories below. The distant sounds of his security team clearing the floor. "I told you," he said, "that this position carries risk. I told myself I had prepared for it." A pause. I was not prepared. Her hands had somehow found his forearms. She didn't know when that had happened. Neither was I, she admitted. He lifted his head. His eyes opened, and she was right there, close enough that every thought she'd been managing carefully for 5 months dissolved into simple, stripped-back truth. He kissed her. Or she kissed him. Or they moved toward each other at exactly the same moment because something inevitable had finally found its opening, slow at first, as though asking, and then certain. His hands moved into her hair, her hands gripped his arms, and the whole terrible, frightening night became a single point of warmth and salt, and the realest thing she had ever felt. The city lights burned beyond the stairwell window. Seoul turned below them. And for one long, breathless stretch of time, everything outside that space simply ceased to matter. She woke before dawn. The room was Kyungmin's private apartment on the 61st floor. She had no clear memory of agreeing to go there. She had simply been guided and gone, because she had been in shock and he had been an anchor. She was on the guest bed, fully clothed, and through the floor-to-ceiling glass, she could see Seoul washed in that particular blue that exists only in the hour before sunrise. She was alone. She listened to the apartment silence and assembled what she knew. She had kissed Oh Kyungmin in a stairwell after nearly being kidnapped. She had gone to his apartment. She had, at some point after that, been placed in the guest room with a first aid kit on the nightstand and a blanket over her. And now it was 4:30 in the morning, and the world had the particular quality of irreversibility. She thought about his face in the stairwell, the undone version of him, the terrified, reaching, real version that no one in his empire would believe existed. She had seen it. She had felt it. And now, in the cold clarity of 4:30 a.m., fear arrived where the relief had been. Because she knew men like him, not personally, but she knew the architecture. Power and tenderness were not the same thing, and a man who had spent his adult life building walls did not dismantle them permanently because one terrifying night cracked them. He would wake up. He would rebuild. And she would be, what? The woman who'd seen too much. The employee who'd complicated things. She sat up, found her shoes, her bag, her torn jacket. She wrote a note, brief, professional, "Thank you for the hospitality. I'll be at the office by 9, and placed it on the kitchen counter. Then she walked out because it was better to leave before she was made to feel that she should. The driver she flagged outside the tower looked alarmed by her appearance, torn sleeve, bandaged hand, 3 hair, but said nothing and took her home, and Destiny sat in the back of the cab with her hands folded in her lap and the very calm, very deliberate practice of not crying. She had one rule in the whole of her complicated soul life, and it was this: do not give your whole heart to something that cannot hold it. She was fairly certain she had already broken it. She arrived at the office at 9 as promised. She was dressed impeccably. She had slept 2 hours and used the remaining time to reassemble every professional version of herself she possessed. Her face was composed. Her notes were organized. She had reviewed the morning's meeting agenda on the taxi ride over, and when Director Yoon intercepted her in the corridor with a briefing on the previous night's security breach, she discussed it with the calm competence of someone for whom it had not been personal. Kyung-min was in the boardroom when she entered, already mid-meeting with his operations team. He looked at her the moment she walked in, one swift, complete look that she felt from across the room, and then returned to the briefing. She took her seat, opened her tablet, took notes. For the next 6 hours, she was flawlessly professional. She did not reference the stairwell. She did not reference the apartment. She addressed him as Mr. O in front of staff, kept her eyes on her documents during the moments when she could feel him watching her, and when the last meeting of the day concluded and the room emptied, she was the first one out the door. She heard him say her name, just that, just Destiny, in a voice that was not his office voice, and she kept walking. By the end of the first week of this, Director Yoon appeared in the doorway of her office. "He hasn't eaten properly since Tuesday," he said, by way of greeting. She looked up from her document. "That's not my responsibility. He hasn't signed off on the Jeju contracts. He's been staring at them for 3 days." Yoon's expression was carefully neutral. "He canceled 2 meetings. Director Yoon." "I've worked for him for 11 years, Yoon said. He stepped into the office and lowered his voice. "I have never seen him cancel a meeting for anything short of a verified crisis. He has never," he paused, choosing the words, "been distracted." He met her eyes. "In 11 years. Destiny held his gaze. Her chest was doing the thing it did every time someone brought him into a conversation. She had become very skilled at appearing unmoved while experiencing internal catastrophe. "He's fine," she said. "He's a grown man running an empire. He's a grown man who forgot his own coffee this morning." Yoon gave her one last measured look. "That has literally never happened." He left without another word. He found her on the rooftop. She came up there sometimes in the evenings when the office felt too enclosed, a habit she developed in her 2nd month, and she thought she was the only one who knew about it. She'd been wrong about that, apparently, because Kyung-min stepped through the rooftop access door at 7:15 on a Thursday evening looking like a man who had tracked her specifically, not stumbled. He was still in his full suit. The soul wind was pulling at his hair. She turned back to the view. Below them, the city was all lights and velocity. "You haven't answered any of my messages," he said. "I've answered all the work ones." "Destiny." Kyung-min. He came to stand beside her at the railing, close but not touching. The city spread out in every direction, immense and indifferent, and between them the silence had the specific quality of a conversation already in progress. "You left," he said. "I had work. At 4 in the morning. Early start." She could hear him exhale slowly. "Destiny. Look at me." She didn't want to, because looking at him was the problem. It had always been the problem, from the very first night with the champagne flute and the 4 words she should never have spoken. But she turned because she had also never been built for avoidance. He was closer than she'd realized. And his face, all that guarded, managed, controlled face was open in a way she recognized from the stairwell. As though the rooftop had the same properties as the emergency, it stripped him. "I am not good at this," he said, and the admission clearly cost him. He stopped. His jaw worked. "I've spent 15 years operating in a world where attachment is a liability, where trusting someone is a risk I cannot afford to take." He was looking at her with the directness of someone who had made a decision and was committed to it now regardless of the outcome. "And then you walked into a boardroom with a champagne bottle and told me the truth when no one else would, and I have been a breath. I have been compromised since that night." Destiny was very still. "I don't know how to do this properly," he continued. "I am aware that I have been." He paused again, and she could see him searching for the word. "Controlling. Protective to a degree that is perhaps unreasonable. Possessive in ways I have tried to manage with varying degrees of success." "Varying degrees," she repeated, and there was something fragile and warm threatening to break through her composure. The Gerard situation was not subtle. A slight pause. "I recognize that." "No," she agreed. "It was not. Ha-jun is a decent man, and you are free to." "Oh, don't." The words came out before she could stop them. "Don't be reasonable and generous about it now. It's much worse." Something moved across his face. "Worse. You're easier to resist when you're being difficult," she said, and her voice had gone quieter, without her permission. He was looking at her the way he'd looked at her in the stairwell, as though she was the only fixed point in a world that moved. "Then I won't be reasonable," he said. "I want you, Destiny. Not as an employee. Not as a convenience. I have wanted you since the night we met, and I've been trying to be appropriate about it out of some concern that I would," he stopped. "That you would leave if I was honest." She looked at him for a long time. "And if I leave anyway? Then I will spend a significant amount of time being professionally unreasonable until I find a way to make you come back." His voice was perfectly even. His eyes were not. Something broke open in her chest, warm and terrifying and exactly as inevitable as she'd been afraid of. "You're very arrogant," she said. "Yes. And possessive." "Acknowledged. And you run a criminal empire. A diversified criminal empire." A beat. And then, for the first time, real and full and unmanaged, he smiled. She felt it like sunlight. "Kyungmin," she said. "Yes." "Stop talking." He closed the distance between them, and this time there was no stairwell and no terror and no chaos. Just the rooftop and the city and his hands in her hair, and the exhale of both of them finally letting the thing they'd been holding breathe. They didn't announce it. There was nothing to announce. But the office noticed within 48 hours anyway, because Oh Kyung-min stopped being distracted and started being the most focused, decisive, and simultaneously unsettling version of himself. The kind of focus that comes from a man who has resolved an internal conflict and transferred all that energy back into his work. He also, notably, stopped being subtle about the small things. Coffee appeared on her desk every morning without discussion. The car was always there. Not as a courtesy, but with a driver who knew her schedule better than she did. And when Ha-jun smiled at her across the atrium and Kyung-min happened to appear at her side within 30 seconds, a hand at her back, a look exchanged with Ha-jun that was polite and absolutely arctic, Ha-jun simply said, with magnificent diplomacy, "Good morning, Mr. Oh," and found somewhere else to be. She looked at Kyung-min. "You realize the whole building knows." "I'm aware." "That doesn't bother you?" He looked at her steadily. "There is no version of this where I pretend you are not mine," he said simply, "so no." She should have found that unbearably presumptuous. Instead, she found herself smiling into her coffee. "I am in so much trouble," she thought again. This time it didn't frighten her. But of course it wasn't over. The Jungdo network, stung by the failure of their first move, regrouped. Their target this time was not Destiny directly, it was her reputation, which in some ways was more dangerous. A manufactured scandal, distributed through 3 Korean media outlets simultaneously. Photographs, altered through software, depicting special executive liaison Destiny Adeyemi in compromising meetings with rival executives. Accompanying text implied she was a corporate spy, placed in the Haein group by competitors, with a secondary implication, stated with the particular cruelty of tabloid racism, that her hire had been motivated by Kyungmin's personal interests rather than professional ones. It landed on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, Destiny's phone was overwhelmed and 2 of the Haein group's subsidiary boards had requested emergency calls. She was in Kyungmin's office when Director Yoon brought the reports in. She read them.
Set them down.
Her hands were steady. Get me legal, she said, to no one in particular. Already done, Kyungmin said. He was standing at the window, which was where he stood when the management of his feelings required a view. His voice was controlled. The set of his shoulders was not. I want the source of the photographs traced, and I want the originating network's legal exposure identified within 12 hours. There's also the board, Yoon said carefully. I'll handle the board. Kyungmin turned. His eyes went to Destiny. Are you all right? I'm furious, she said, but functional. She met his gaze. I didn't do any of this. I know. You know that without asking. Of course. He said it with such absolute certainty that something in her chest ached. Destiny, I know you. I know precisely what you are capable of, and none of it is this. The board calls were brutal. The Haein group's more conservative members pushed hard on the appearance of impropriety, not because they genuinely believed the fabrications, but because they saw an opening, a vulnerability in their chairman that hadn't existed before. Kyungmin handled them with the same methodical, devastating calm he brought to every confrontation, dismantling each concern with documented evidence, legal analysis, and the occasional ice-cold implication that any board member choosing to use manufactured tabloid content as governance ammunition would find the experience professionally consequential. By end of day, the board had issued a formal statement of support. By end of the following day, legal had traced the photographs to a digital consulting firm linked to the Jungdo network, and the media outlets had received cease and desist orders that carried enough teeth to produce rapid, prominent corrections. Destiny stood in Kyungmin's office at 9 p.m., with the city dark outside the glass, and felt something shift from furious to exhausted to, quietly, unexpectedly moved. You didn't doubt me, she said. Not for a second. He looked at her from across the room. Why would I? Because the photographs were designed to make it look. Destiny. His voice was very quiet. You are the person who warned me about Jungwon at risk to yourself, with nothing to gain, when no one else in that room saw or spoke. You are the most honest person in my organization by a significant margin. The idea that I would doubt you because of a manipulated image is, he stopped. Something crossed his face that was almost offended. It is not possible. She crossed the room. He stayed very still. She took his face in her hands the way he had taken hers in the stairwell, and she pressed her forehead to his. Thank you, she said. His arms came around her, and neither of them spoke for a long time, and the city turned outside the glass, and it was enough. The Jungdo network made their final move 6 weeks later. This one was not subtle. This one was a vehicle interception on a highway at night. Her car, her driver, and Destiny herself, returning from a field visit to the Haein Group's Busan development. The driver was run off the road, and Destiny, who had the presence of mind to immediately activate her emergency beacon and lock herself in the car's reinforced rear compartment, spent 47 minutes in the dark while the sound of men working on the vehicle's exterior filled the silence. She was not afraid. She was present. She breathed. She kept her eyes on the beacon's pulsing light, and she thought about her grandmother's market and the morning light in Lagos, and the particular way Kyungmin said her name when they were alone, like it was the one thing in his vocabulary that carried no protection. The Haein Group's response team reached the vehicle in under an hour. The Jungdo men were apprehended. Kyungmin arrived 13 minutes after the response team. She heard his voice before she heard anything else. Outside the vehicle, clipped and ferocious and directed at his security director with a velocity that made her close her eyes in a mix of relief and something deeper. When the door opened and he was there, physically there, crouching at the car door with the cold night air around him and his eyes on her face with that raw, unmanaged expression she had started to recognize as his most honest self, She felt tears threaten for the first time since the whole ordeal began. She did not cry, but it was close. He helped her out. His hands checked her, shoulders, arms, face, with a thoroughness that was half medical and half something more personal, and when he was satisfied that she was physically intact, he pulled her against his chest and held her with the particular grip of a man who has spent 47 minutes in a specific brand of hell. "I'm okay," she said, into the fabric of his jacket. "I know." His voice was rough. I know you're okay." He held on anyway. Later, in the car back to Seoul, surrounded by 3 vehicles of security in front and behind, Kyungmin sat beside her and did not let go of her hand. "This ends," he said. "The Jungdo network. It ends now." She looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means I have spent the last 6 weeks being measured and legal and patient, and it has resulted in He stopped. Started again. "In you being in a locked car on a highway for 47 minutes. So the measured legal approach is finished." "Kyungmin." "I will handle it," he said. "You will not be touched again." She believed him. Not because of the power or the resources or the empire, but because of the way he said it, with the absolute, quiet certainty of a man making a promise to the thing he values most in the world. What he did to the Jungdo network over the following 3 weeks was not entirely legal and was never discussed in her presence. But she knew, from the change in Director Yoon's posture and the cessation of every secondary threat, and the way the organization's leadership quietly and permanently relocated outside of Korean jurisdiction, that Oh Kyungmin had done precisely what he said. The world had not burned, but there had definitely been heat. 2 months after the highway, life had resumed its version of normal, which for them meant late office nights and shared coffee and a relationship that had moved quietly and completely, from professional to personal, without either of them announcing it. She was at his apartment, properly, not as a guest, when he appeared in the doorway of the living room holding something small. She was cross-legged on the floor with documents spread around her, because she did her best thinking horizontally arranged, and she looked up. He was holding a ring box. She stared at it. "Kyungmin." "Don't analyze it," he said, and there was something almost nervous in his voice, which was so unprecedented that she could only stare. "I am not good at speeches. I have tried to draft 1 3 times, and each version is either too short or too cold, and apparently I am constitutionally incapable of." "Kyungmin." He stopped. "Come sit down," she said. He came and sat. She took the box from him, opened it, a ring that was simple and exact and felt chosen rather than purchased, and looked at it for a long, quiet moment. "You burned down a criminal network for me," she said. "I prefer dismantled. You've sent a car every late night for 7 months. Safety concern. You learned how to make Nigerian pepper soup." A pause. There were multiple attempts before it was acceptable. She looked up at him. He was watching her with that expression, the one beneath all the other ones, the real one, warm and complex and containing multitudes. "I warned a man I'd never met in a room that could have gotten me killed," she said, "and it brought me here." She turned the ring in the light. "My grandmother would call that God's arrangement." "Your grandmother sounds infallible." She took his hand, placed the ring in it, then held her left hand out. He looked at her. Something moved through his face, relief, wonder, and a joy so pure and briefly unguarded that she stored the image of it somewhere permanent. He put the ring on her finger. She kissed him. He held her face the way he always held it, as though she was the most important thing in the room, which, as it turned out, was simply how he was. The wedding was private, 40 people in a garden on Jeju Island, on a bright October morning with the sea visible from the ceremony site, and her family flown in from Lagos, and her grandmother in the front row wearing ankara so vivid it read like a celebration all by itself. Kyungmin stood at the end of the aisle in a charcoal suit with no tie. Some things never change, and when she appeared on her father's arm, she watched him lose, briefly and completely, every shred of composed public persona he had ever constructed. His face was open. Fully, helplessly open. She walked toward him with a smile. She couldn't have stopped if she'd tried, and when her father placed her hand in his, He held it like a man who had been handed something he had not expected the world to give him and was not going to let go. The vows were in English and Korean. They wrote their own. His were short and direct and contained one line that she would remember for the rest of her life. I was running an empire I thought was my life until a woman with a champagne flute reminded me that courage is not about power. I choose you. Every day. Without exception. Her grandmother, in the front row, wept without apology. 6 months after the wedding, Destiny sat in the Hayen Group's executive suite, her own now, with her name on the door and chief operating officer beneath it, a development she had resisted, accepted, and ultimately made extraordinary, and looked at the small white rectangle in her hand. A pregnancy test. The window behind her showed Seoul in January, gray sky, bright city, the relentless forward motion of a place that never quite stopped. Her hand was steady. Her chest was full of something too large and warm to name. She heard the outer office door open. Heard his footsteps. She knew them exactly now, the particular rhythm. He appeared in the doorway, already looking at her the way he always looked at her when she was quiet. What is it? She held up the test. Oh, Kyungmin, Mafia Boss, feared chairman, the most controlled and guarded man in the room in every room he had ever occupied, went absolutely still. Then he crossed the office in 4 steps, took her face in his hands, and held her with his forehead against hers and his eyes closed and something breaking open in him the way ice breaks in spring, slowly and then all at once. Destiny, he said. It was all he said. Just her name. The way he always said it when everything else was stripped away. I know, she said back. Outside, Seoul continued. The empire ran. The city turned. And in a glass-walled office 40 floors above it, 2 people who had found each other through danger and truth and an inconvenient conscience chose, again, to hold on. Some things are arranged before they are understood. Her grandmother had always known. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Afrokorea TV. New stories drop every day, love, danger, and everything in between. See you next time.